The Heisman race is heating up as there have been a lot of shakeups in my list over the last few weeks. We've had players come and go, while a few have stayed in my list. Today, we're going to be looking at my Heisman top 10 after 5 weeks of the college football season. Before we get to my top 10, make sure to smash that subscribe button and turn on those notifications if you're new to my channel. If you're watching this video, odds are that you love college football, and odds are you aren't subscribed to my channel, so make sure to subscribe to one of the best college football communities here on YouTube. I'll be posting college football videos every day during the season, so make sure to subscribe so you never miss a video. Also, make sure to drop a like on this video as well. It helps out with that YouTube algorithm, plus helps share the video with more college football fans. Plus, it only takes a second to do. We're going to kick off today's video with a new entry in UCLA quarterback Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Quietly, he's been having a really solid season for UCLA, who's 5-0 and ranked inside the top 20 of the AP poll. He's completing 74% of his passes, the best mark in the entire Pac-12. He's thrown for 1,200 yards with 11 passing touchdowns and only 1 interception. He's also added over 200 yards on the ground, averaging more than 7 yards a carry with 3 rushing touchdowns. He had one of the best games of his career this past week against Washington, as he threw for over 300 yards with 3 passing touchdowns while adding 50 yards on the ground with a rushing score. This is somehow DTR's 5th season with the Bruins, but it looked like he saved his best season for his last. No, this isn't a drill, but Bo Nix comes into my top 10 of my Heisman list. And the best part is, he's more than deserving of being in the discussion. So far through the first 5 games for the Ducks, Bo Nix is completing a very nice 69% of his passes for just under 1,300 yards with 12 passing touchdowns. On the ground, he's averaging more than 8 yards a carry for 260 rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns. Bo Nix is having a fantastic season, but if you take out week 1 against Georgia, his numbers have been the best among all quarterbacks over the last 4 weeks. This past week against Stanford, he threw for 160 yards with 2 passing touchdowns while adding 140 yards on the ground with 2 rushing scores. In the week prior, in a comeback victory over Washington State, he threw for a career-high 430 yards with 3 passing touchdowns while adding 30 yards on the ground. The week prior, in a very impressive win over a ranked BYU team, he threw for over 200 yards with 2 passing touchdowns while rushing for 3 touchdowns as well. It only took 4 years, but I'm finally getting my dream of Bo Nix being a Heisman contender. If he continues to put up these numbers and Oregon continues to win games, there is actually a possibility that Bo Nix himself is going to be a Heisman finalist. Like I said, I've been waiting 4 years for this moment. He started the season really high in Heisman rankings, but now he's starting to back it up with his play, as DJ Uiagalelei cracks my list for the first time this season. In 5 games for the Tigers, he's thrown for over 1,200 yards with 11 passing touchdowns and only 1 interception. He's also added 250 yards on the ground with 3 rushing scores. Through the first month of the season, he's already thrown more touchdown passes than he had all of last season in 13 games, and he's also more than halfway to his passing yards mark from last season as well. After a slow start to the season, he's really picked it up over the last few weeks. This past weekend against NC State, he threw for 200 yards with a touchdown while leading the Tigers with 70 rushing yards and 2 rushing scores. The previous week, in a comeback victory on the road at Wake Forest, he threw for just under 400 yards with 5 passing touchdowns while adding 50 yards on the ground as well. It's taken some time, but it looks like DJ Uiagalelei is finally living up to the hype. Staying in our top 10 is Michigan running back Blake Corum, who's been the best running back in all of college football so far this season. He's rushed for over 600 yards, the 4th most in the entire country. His 10 rushing touchdowns are the most in all of college football. He started the season putting up some really good numbers, but what he's done over the last 3 weeks have been incredible. 3 weeks ago, he rushed for 5 touchdowns against Connecticut. Last week against Maryland, he rushed for 250 yards with 2 rushing scores. Then, this past weekend on the road at Iowa, he rushed for over 130 yards with a rushing touchdown. It's going to be tough for a running back to win the Heisman Trophy this season, but with Blake Corum as the clear best player on this Michigan team, if they're able to stay undefeated and make a playoff push, he has a legitimate case of being a running back that could win the Heisman Trophy this season. I have Kansas quarterback Jalen Daniels slipping a few spots, but he's still right in the Heisman discussion. For the Jayhawks this season, he's thrown for 1,000 yards with 11 passing touchdowns and only 1 interception. He's also added over 300 yards on the ground, averaging more than 7 yards a carry with 5 rushing scores. I get that Kansas is still undefeated, but Daniels had a pretty shaky game this week against Iowa State. He completed only 7 of 14 passes for 93 yards. He did have a touchdown on the ground, though he rushed for only 9 yards on 8 carries. Still, he's been one of the better quarterbacks in all of college football this season. He's also been one of the more surprising ones. With Kansas set to face a ranked TCU team this weekend, if Jalen Daniels is able to have a solid game and Kansas picks up the victory, he'll be right back in my top 3 or 4. Cracking the list for the first time is Kansas State quarterback Adrian Martinez, who is having by far the best season of his college football career. So far on the season, his passing numbers won't necessarily blow you away. He's thrown for 650 yards with only 3 passing touchdowns and 0 interceptions. But his damage has come on the ground as he's rushed for 500 yards with 9 rushing touchdowns. He currently is 3rd in the Big 12 in rushing yards, and he leads the Big 12 in rushing touchdowns and is number 2 in all of college football. He's put Kansas State on his back and has them as one of the best teams in the entire Big 12. Last week on the road at Oklahoma, he threw for 230 yards with a passing touchdown while adding 4 touchdowns on the ground with 150 rushing yards. Well, he followed that up with a very impressive victory over Texas Tech, throwing for over 100 yards with a passing touchdown while adding 170 yards on the ground with 3 rushing scores. His lack of passing numbers might end up hurting his chances in the Heisman race, but the numbers he's going to put up on the ground may be some of the best we've seen from a college football quarterback in some time. Personally, I'm just glad to see Adrian Martinez finally thriving with a brand new program. We all knew of the talent he had while at Nebraska, but he was never able to really utilize it. Now, he looks like one of the better quarterbacks in the entire country. Although Tennessee didn't play last week, Hendon Hooker is still right in the Heisman race. He's completing 72% of his passes for 1,200 yards with 8 passing touchdowns and 0 interceptions. On the ground, he's also rushed for 200 yards with 3 rushing scores. Since Tennessee didn't play last week, I'll just remind you of what he did the week prior against Florida. He completed 79% of his passes for 350 yards and 2 passing touchdowns, while adding over 100 yards on the ground with a rushing score. Tennessee's ranked inside the top 10, and Hendon Hooker has some of the best numbers among all quarterbacks in only 4 games so far. If I were to guess, the Vols are going to continue to win, and Hendon Hooker is going to continue to light up the stat sheet. It's going to be interesting to see how Bryce Young fares in the Heisman race as he's currently dealing with an injury. As of right now, I don't know if he's going to miss this weekend's game or how many games he's going to miss in total. But if he were to miss some time, it will likely hurt his chances. Through 5 games this season, he's thrown for 1,200 yards with 14 passing touchdowns and 3 interceptions. He's also added 150 yards on the ground with 3 rushing scores as well. He was looking solid this past weekend against Arkansas before he left with an injury. At the time of his injury, he had thrown for over 170 yards on only 7 completions. He threw a touchdown pass and scored a touchdown on the ground as well. Like I mentioned, if Bryce Young misses time, his Heisman chances might take a bit of a hit. But as of right now, he's still put up some of the best numbers in the entire country. Caleb Williams comes in at number 2, where he has USC 5-0 on the season. He's completing 67% of his passes for over 1,400 yards with 12 passing touchdowns and only 1 interception. He's also added 150 yards on the ground with 3 rushing scores. He had probably his best game of the season this past week against Arizona State. He completed 73% of his passes for a season-high 350 passing yards. He also had 3 passing touchdowns while rushing for 50 yards with a rushing score. The only reason I'm a little hesitant with Caleb Williams at this point in the season is the fact that USC just hasn't played anybody. I mean, at this point, their best matchup has been Oregon State, and even in that game, he wasn't all that fantastic. But still remaining at number 1 is CJ Stroud, who continues to have an insane start to his campaign. Through 5 games, he's completing 69% of his passes for 1,400 yards. He's thrown 18 touchdowns with only 2 interceptions. He had a bit of a quiet game this past weekend against Rutgers as he threw for only 150 yards with 2 passing touchdowns. Both of those are season lows for him. Still, he's been lighting up the stat sheet, and Ohio State looks like one of the best offenses in all of college football. With the season approaching its halfway mark, it looks like CJ Stroud is the current favorite and the guy to beat at this point. Well, those are the 10 players I currently have in my Heisman race. Was there a player that I had ranked too high or ranked too low, or was there a player that I didn't mention that should have cracked this list? Whoever you think it is, let me know in the comment section down below. Before you leave, make sure to smash that subscribe button and turn on those notifications if you're new to my channel. If you love college football, this is definitely the place for you. Like I mentioned earlier, I'll be posting videos every day during the college football season. So make sure to subscribe if you call yourself a college football fan. Also, make sure to drop a like on this video as well. It helps out with that YouTube algorithm and helps share the video with more college football fans. Plus, it only takes a second to do. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.